Thank you all for choosing this particular session. If you want to mark it now, that'd be great. I'm from Yorkshire, as you might hear from the accent, so I've got slides just in case it doesn't translate. So what I thought I would do, first of all, was actually stick with the brief, because I think we've all sat in these sessions and you see the brief and then you turn up and it's not quite what was going to be covered. So I am going to try and stick to what we said that we would cover in this session, which in essence is how do we as employers engage with the workforce that does have multi-generations, and trying to get engagement with individuals who don't have a corporate email address or a mobile phone number can be quite difficult. So what I wanted to cover to start with was some of my background and experience, and actually kind of explain the kind of journey that I've been on and what I've picked up over the past 20 years. So I started off in the world of online recruitment, where I was convincing a HR director or a security company that we should go online. And a lot of my presentation today also is going to be about trying to dispel a few myths. He said, it's not going to be any good for us. My target audience isn't online. And I said, our number one search term is security guard. So we dispelled the myth with the data. And again, there's a theme there. Then spent 6 years in Oracle, doing e-business suite and PeopleSoft solutions, and convincing organizations that employees would use self-service. They would log onto a computer. They would fill in information that ordinarily have been filled in on a paper form. And as we know, it's now a given that that's part of it. Then spent a few years actually putting this technology in and convincing organizations that actually it was more than just putting it on a self-service screen, that actually employees would log on to these solutions on a tablet, on a mobile phone, and of course they are. And then spent a couple of years in KPMG advising organizations like yourselves on how to transform HR using technology, whether that be anything from an HCM system through to learning, recruitment, and more latterly kind of artificial intelligence, robotic process automation type of technologies, which all sound really scary, but actually when you find people that know what they're talking about, they're normally not quite as frightening as they appear. A couple of years in employee relations outsourcing, and more recently around employee experience and employee engagement. So what I'm going to try and share with you in a really whistle-stop next 10 or 15 minutes is some of kind of what I've seen and heard, particularly over the last 6 to 9 months whilst I've been with Personal Group, and more than happy to take questions throughout. There is Slido, so again, if you get a chance, do put your questions in as we're going through. So what does the employee want? And what I've done here is pulled out a few themes through the last 20 years that a lot of these things are still relevant today, and I think it is very easy to get hung up on the latest and greatest, but actually you still have to do some of the hygiene things as well. So in the world of actually, people call it digital, not a phrase I like particularly, but I think if you're looking at an organization that has employees where you want to engage with them via digital means, then it has to be about having something that is web-based and accessible, but also these days they want something that's in the cloud. They're using Amazon, they're using Deliveroo and Uber, as we've heard earlier. That's what the employee's expecting. They're expecting something similar. They also want something that's really easy to use. I've seen a lot of solutions delivered where literally somebody's taken the paper form, recreated it, and put it on a website. And we've all used systems like that in our day-to-day consumer experiences where it just doesn't work. So again, you need to be thinking about it from an ease of use perspective. I absolutely agree with the previous speaker. When I was in KPMG, we were looking at the customer experience collateral and the solutions we were putting out there for CMOs, and we took that whole collateral deck and completely repurposed it for HR. There's absolutely no doubt that there is a correlation between what you do as a consumer experience can absolutely be translated to an employee experience, and the two, as your previous speaker said, are absolutely aligned. At the same time as talking about delivering out self-service to engage with employees digitally, I think there's also an element of you have to remember that they're a human. And I think, we hear about all these various ways of segmenting employees, whether it's millennials or whatever. But actually, at the end of the day, the feedback I've had is you have to treat employees as a human, as an individual, and think what's in it for them. And then kind of finally, what I've kind of seen as well is that employees want this to be relevant to them. They're sick of receiving communications or access to systems that aren't relevant to them. And it goes back to that human piece, which is who is that individual? What do they need access to? But also they want to get it at the time that's right for them. It doesn't have to be something that they get whilst they're in the office, for example. So what does the employee normally get? So this has kind of been my experience talking to organizations. We talk about making it web-based and accessible, but quite often I'm still meeting organizations who have got posters, who are still using emails, still using texts and WhatsApp groups. the employee's looking for access to this information, but quite often it's on an intranet that they just cannot navigate. And maybe it's a HR intranet that hangs off the corporate one, and there's links to things where they have to have a different username and password. And these are still some of the challenges that I'm going to cover that we need to support. You know, they're still getting self-service forms, and actually they want to be able to do this kind of thing on the mobile whilst they're on a train, on a tube, etc. They're getting less than the customer experience, and again, that's the bar that we're all now as an industry looking to achieve, is that if the customer experience is lower, if the employee experience is lower than the customer experience, then you have a challenge. As much as they can self-serve for information and they want to be treated like a human, what they are getting at the moment is they're getting FAQs and they're getting bamboozled with, well, we're going to deliver AI robots, call it what you will, and sometimes they're a little bit fearful that what they want to do is they want to engage with an individual and combine it with information that they can self-serve. There is a little bit of fear in the employee base, which is, am I going to be interacting with a robot at some point? And I've already seen organisations start to move down that route. But ultimately, they're also getting information that's quite generic. So, you know, we're in a digital world and they're getting generic information, and they're getting information that quite often they can't access. So if you want to get access to that information, it's on a terminal, and you're going to have to get in the queue behind 2 employees to get access to it. So the employee experience for me for that next generation in terms of what they want from a digital perspective, I pulled out 2 quotes here from Deloitte and from McKinsey. I resisted putting a KPMG one up there. And you can see there from their quotes, they're talking about how we have to be looking at taking that consumer experience into the employee experience process. And we need to be creating the links between, as the previous speaker said, you know, how does that employee behaving and engaging internally, and how does that then transmit when they go externally? So for me, I think it is very much about, if you're thinking about how you engage with your workforce, however it's made up, is it certainly not that one-size-fits-all, and if you are putting that all together for them, then you have to be thinking about it from that employee experience viewpoint. So, as I said, you know, I hate the word millennial personally, and all the other Generation X baby boomers. I've got 3 daughters, apparently they're all millennials, they couldn't be any different. So they're also, as well as employees, they're not interested in job descriptions because they kind of read that when they applied, and they've been with you a couple of years. It's gone. They're not interested in the contract of employment, and their needs are not driven by salary, as we know. So what are they after? And I've tried to summarize it here. It's about remembering that they're human. It's about engaging with them in a way that they can be recognized. Mobile is absolutely a key theme here, and it is about giving what I'd call that kind of consumer-grade experience. So I've paraphrased a few, hopefully not too controversial statements. And what I've looked at with the organisations I've been working with recently is there's a number of kind of HR themes, and the feedback I've had from individuals coming to these kind of events and others is that they kind of find it quite overwhelming because there's lots of vendors, lots of suppliers, different peers and colleagues on different parts of the kind of the curve. And what I've tried to do is chunk it up into how I've seen other organisations do it, which is to think about it from if you're looking at that digital mobile engagement, it's to think about it from a comms perspective, from engagement, from benefits, and from well-being. And you can see there, I'm being told, employees want us to communicate with them, but we're putting it on the intranet, that we want to increase employee engagement, but we've scrapped the annual survey. We followed the EY route. They don't understand the package, but we gave them a total reward statement. And then it's all about, insert your own label here, it's all about mental, physical, or financial wellness, but they're not using what we bought. I spoke to an ex-colleague recently who's the HRD of a fairly large UK organisation, and she said, we bought an online video doctor service, and it's brilliant, but nobody's using it. But nobody knew where it was, how to get access to it, different username and password, wasn't integrated with the HR system, and this is a technology company. So I'm going to rattle through these at speed, but in terms of the communications, these are the kind of challenges that I'm seeing organisations have, and I'm sure they're all going to be quite familiar to you. I think we concentrate a lot on the employees that drive a desk, that drive a PC or a laptop. Most of the employees in the UK haven't got a corporate email address, or they get too many emails as it is, and they've quite often not got a work phone, and they definitely don't have a work mobile number. Maybe they're not at a desk, they're working remotely, they're off-site, they're on the road, rarely in the office, and kind of doing shift work. There are some solutions. Again, as I would say, whatever you're doing in terms of digital engagement, is think about mobile first, not just about an internet browser. Apps are absolutely brilliant, but if you look at your phone, You can probably scroll through 3 or 4 pages and see lots of apps icons. That's what you're competing with. As the guy from Aon said earlier, you know, the first thing he's doing is logging on and looking at social media. And if you're looking at delivering a digital solution, then you're competing with LinkedIn and Facebook on a morning and an evening. You can link these kind of solutions to personal email addresses and mobile phone numbers. I know everybody was quite worried about GDPR, and quite rightly so, given the 4% fine, but these things are solvable. There are organisations out there engaging with employees digitally and getting their information and managing it in a secure way. It is possible. But ultimately, you have a lot of data in that filing system that you spent a few million on rolling out over a few years, whether that's Oracle, Workday, SAP, or any other. You can integrate your digital solutions with that, leverage that data, and pull it through and make different use of it. From an engagement point of view, as we keep hearing, surveys, responses are low. There's too much of a gap between the response and then the feedback. Reward and recognition is either inconsistent or just not happening at all. And also what I'm hearing out of a lot of the employee surveys that companies are doing is the feedback is policies and procedures, online content is just too hard to find for employees. So what can you do? I would say focus on adoption. If you get the adoption, you'll get the usage. And if you can target the information that you're pushing out, perhaps using mobile phones and notifications, you can then actually start to get that usage in the ROI that you've put into the business case to get the budget in the first place. And then you can start to think about what are the kind of habits that you want employees to engage with via sort of digital solutions that you can then leverage. So things like pay slips and rotas and wellness applications. I spoke to a vendor the other day that's got a wellness app. They said their employee base is logging in 6 times a day. If you've got that, then you're suddenly able to compete with Facebook and LinkedIn on the employee's own phone. Surveys, obviously the annual survey, everybody's got their own view on that, but pulse surveys, again, are a good way digitally of engaging with employees. And if you've linked it to the HR system, you can do a pulse survey to a number of individuals sat at certain desks or at a certain geographic location. You can be really, really targeted. And I think you have to engage employees and integrate the reward and recognition system with the data that you've got in HR. At the moment, too often they're quite separate, and you have to be able to enable the content that you have, lift it up out of the intranet, lift it out of emails and posters and printed documents and push it out into the phone. It is absolutely possible, and it's done in a way where it can be done by people who are not technical. You don't have to go to IT to do this. There are solutions out there that you can use yourselves. At the end of the day, we all use LinkedIn and we're doing our own content management. From a benefits point of view, we've heard kind of what Aon have said, and I agree to an extent. And I think there's a lot of challenge out there about how you put a benefits strategy together that enables recruitment, enables retention. But at the end of the day, a lot of these benefits are very low usage. So I think, again, if you start to think mobile first, you will get the adoption, and therefore you'll get the ROI from the benefits that you are investing in. There is the ability to get the mobile experience to happen in the onboarding, so you get the candidate actually engaging with you digitally. It carries on all the way through into them becoming an employee. I think you can also start to think about how you engage with employees. I spoke to one recently who said, don't put Waitrose in the app for the benefits because we haven't got a Waitrose anywhere near any of our locations. And it was about thinking about how we use the data that we know about the employee to refine the solution that we're delivering to them. And I've mentioned GDPR. The piece I would mention there is gamification is great. Whatever you're rolling out digitally, if you can get some kind of gamification into it, leaderboards are great. There's an organisation we're talking to at the moment delivering wellness solutions, and they've got a survivor, and the bottom 5% fall off the step count challenge. There's no monetary amount to it, but the gamification has increased the adoption and the usage. And then from a wellbeing point of view, mental health all over the headlines, but it's got to be more than that week in May. I think people are looking at mental health and physical health and financial health separately. You have to look at it in a combined way. I'm being asked, will employees use an online doctor? Will they go onto their phone and do a FaceTime with a GP? Wearable tech, it's expensive. I can't afford to pay for a Fitbit for every employee in the organisation. These are the kind of challenges that are coming through, but I'm being told that well-being, if you get it wrong, affects the bottom line. So what kind of solutions are out there? You can provide, via a mobile digital device, you can provide access to counselling. We know that reduces workplace stress. We know that then reduces absence. You can combine it with other initiatives and roll these together, whether that be Disability Confident or perhaps you've got a mental first aider. process in place. It is possible, will people use an online doctor? They absolutely will when they've got a choice between, and we've all been there, phoning up the reception of the doctors trying to figure out I don't know anybody who's ever figured it out, actually how you can get in front of a GP within 2 weeks. Now there are solutions out there where you can digitally, roll out online GPs, video calls, and they can within 2 minutes get reassurance, get a fit note, get a sit note, get a prescription, and 15 minutes later pick it up and pay for it in the same way they would have paid for it if they'd gone to a doctor. So these challenges are definitely solvable. But I think ultimately, with a lot of these wellness solutions, I think you can push them from HR, but if you can get them pulled from the employee, you'll get a lot higher adoption and usage. So this is kind of a slide I've used for some organisations to help them kind of try and figure out what the noise, where they're at. Quite often I'll be contacted by 2 or 3 individuals in the same organisation at the same time who are trying to solve some of the same problems. And I think also it's worth talking to your colleagues and saying, actually, are we all trying to solve the same problem, and actually collate the budget and collate your problems. Otherwise, you end up with a business case that is double counting. So I've seen that a lot. So I'd encourage you to talk to your colleagues and sort of say, well, look, this is how we could chunk it up. What are you working on? What's working? What isn't? How can we work together on pulling something together? Then if you get down to the next level of detail, you can start to chunk it up a little bit further, and maybe you put a RAG review on it. Maybe you put what have we actually got now? What's being used? What isn't? What do we want to switch off? What do we want to highlight more? Let's not throw away the good stuff that we're doing, but actually how can you pull it all together so that 1 and 1 equals 3, rather than it being lots of different pieces of solution. So again, if you chunk it up to the next level, you can start to drill down and say, right, what have we actually got, and make it quite visual. And then I'd then finally come back to think about that employee experience. What is that user journey? Put yourselves in their shoes. Like we said, HR and marketing are very closely aligned. When we're engaged with as a consumer, they think about our mindset. They think about where things are on the shelf. They think about, we've all been on that snake journey through the airport. They do that on purpose. We need to think about that from a HR perspective as well, and just kind of look at it holistically. And obviously, by the time you get to this, you are going to start to need to get some support from IT colleagues, because you do need to get things integrated. You do need to be GDPR compliant. And you do need to make sure that all of this kind of hangs together. Single sign-on, SSO, absolutely. If you can achieve that, then you'll remove that. I've forgotten my username and password, because as soon as you get to that point, it falls over. So in summary, if I was going to leave you with 5 points, I would say focus on that employee experience, focus on their user journey. Second, I would say apps can reach employees that browsers can't. The third is leverage the people data that you already hold in the organisation, even if it's in multiple systems and spreadsheets, and then combine it with the information that an employee will give you, because actually they'll give you more than you hold in your current systems. If you focus on the adoption and pulling together the HR services that you already provide, then you will drive usage. If you get the usage, you'll get the adoption, and if you get that, then you'll get the value from the investment that you've made. And then finally, these things don't have to be done as a big bang. If you've got the budget and you've got the support, then I'd probably call it a controlled explosion. It tends to get through a bit easier. But I would say build on what you're already delivering, and maybe re-promote some of the things that haven't quite landed well, but then roll them out with something new, and then deploy it incrementally, because we've all been overwhelmed by a solution and it's just too much. Whereas you could go back to how I've chunked it up earlier and say, okay, how are we going to roll things out incrementally? Because if we do that, then you'll get the adoption.